think we are live now. Uh, Hello, welcome, folks. Uh, Welcome to this channel. Uh, Always on the news, has always been on the news, and we 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 always get to hear about them. Today they are fighting the Palestinians. Tomorrow, their neighbor, the Lebanese, they've been in a war with Egypt. They've been in a war with Syria, and all this come together forms a basis of history that you have to actually go through these indices in having to understand the problems in the Middle East. So today we are going to be doing our own peeping into what has been the issue in the Middle East. So if you see the thumbnail of our discourse, we target Israel, a tale of tribulation, suffering, survivor, and character. So that is what we target. And please don't just pass by. Stay with us. Drop a comment and let us discuss. This is militano.com, and I am your humble host, Tony, and you know how we do it always. So drop your comments. I'll be reading them out loud. I'll be giving you credit, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and share our videos, and together let us build a world that we will be proud of. So I'm going to take us through a seeming timeline of the Jewish nation. This is a strong nation that was birthed. Their modern date of birth is 1948, and that is what we know. Now, the Jewish nation is a strong nation culturally. I mean, you hardly find a religion that does not trace their origin to the Jewish nation. Whether you call it Islam, you call it Christianity, Judaism. I mean, they trace their origin to the Jewish nation, and that means they are a force in our day. And so, but there is also this recurrent decimal of the Jewish nation seen as a monster nation. I have heard people call them a gangster nation, and so I took my time to go through why. How can a nation so blessed and so mentioned all through history have that kind of image? And so I came up with this. The Jewish nation, or Yisrael as they love to be called today, a tale of tribulation, survivor, and character. Now, the reason I say this is very seldom you read through the pages of history and you see a nation that went through what Israel went through and still stand firm, retaining all our qualities, all our identities, cultural, religious identities. You hardly find. I looked through the pages of history and I couldn't find not even one. So we're going to be reeling out a whole lot of reminders to history. We're going to be telling ourselves this is how it all happened. Now, you see the videos reeling on the screen. Now, it all started in the reign of Emperor Adrian. In AD 138, the ancient city of Israel ceased to exist. Yeah, it ceased to exist when the Roman Emperor Adrian crushed the armies of Israel. I remember that after several failures of the Roman army in that war, they had to recall Severus, their general Severus, who was serving in Britannia, to come lead the war. And virtually almost a number of Roman legions were collapsed to execute that particular war. Now, the war of Bar Kokhba really cost the Romans a lot. And so, when they were able to conquer Israel, one of the most spiteful things they did was to rename the whole land space. So, they renamed it Palestine after their perpetual enemy, the Philistines. Now, when you read through the pages of the Christian Bible, you find out that the Philistines was a neighbor to the Israelis. And one of the most spiteful things to have been done to a people is not to displace them, is to take what they love most and give it to their adversary. So that is what Adrian did. Now, furthermore, what he did was to displace the Jews and then persecuted them, executed a whole lot of them. Now, we're going to talk about the prelude to this war. This war was called the Bar Kokhba War. It was the third uprising, and the several uprisings of the Jews made the Romans to see the Jews as a rebellious people. And so once they were able to be conquered, or say, let me use the word crushed, because it was actually a genocide, so what they did was to displace a whole lot of Jews, persecute them, eliminate the ones they could, it said the Bar Kokhba revolt banned all Jews from Palestine. So any Jew found in Palestine could be persecuted. I mean, that is what it means. That means if a Jew is found within the borders of Palestine, he can be killed, he can be imprisoned. And so this virtually displaced all the Jews, So this, and then the biblical area called Israel was renamed Palestine, just to spite the Jews, because the name Palestine is relative to the Philistines, which also is the name of their eternal adversary, the Philistines. So I want us to have that understanding as we move on. So the land was conquered by various nations until 1517. It was not just the Romans. You had different dominions coming in to conquer the land. The land became very important because it accommodates most of the major religions, and so it became too vital. I know that I think the Sunnis, the Sunni Islam, sees the Al-Aqsa Mosque as the second most holy monument in Islam. The Christians see Jerusalem as the Holy Land. So you see that it became something that much of the world could not do without. And so any leader who wants to prove a point of his being pious conquers the land of Palestine. So it was so till 1517 when it was controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Now the Ottoman Empire is the Turkish Muslim Empire. So the Ottoman Empire retained control from 1517 to about 1917, when basically they lost in the First World War, and then it became a British mandate. So you see that for a very long time, the Jews could not access their homeland. They were everywhere in Europe. They were in other Muslim nations, but a fragment of them did remain in Palestine, and we are able to make do with the laws of the powers that be. So by 1815, only about 14,000 Jews remained in Palestine. So you see, they remained, but they became a minority in their own land. So you have basically the Lebanese taking over the whole land space. Now there's pictures on the wall, a number of them that remained in Palestine, 14,000 counted by 1815. It said only about 14,000 remained in the land of Palestine. But in 1881, in reaction to the ongoing anti-Semitism that was going on in Europe, specifically in Russia, Ukraine, in Germany, a number of young Jews that goes by the name of Ovei Zion, meaning lovers of Zion. They were an organization. They started moving into the Jewish, into Palestine. Then, remember, like I said before, it was under a British mandate. And so the Ovei Zion group were the forerunner of modern Zionism. That's how the movement of Zionism started, from the Ovei Zion, love Palestine. So that happened in 1815. The overturn of the Jewish people to their homeland and the resumption of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. Now, this basically started in 1815. The movement back to the land of Israel by the Zion, by the Jewish in Europe. As at that time, what were the issues in Europe that caused this high level of anti-Semitism and persecution for the Jews? I'll run through some of the points I wrote down here. He said, now the movement from any part of Europe to all right. I want to give it a shout out to Wesley Corey too. It said Jesus who said it is time shall say to all those people marked, I do not know you. And by removing the Jewish vision from their souls, those shall all fall dead and be unburied worldwide. I want to say, Wesley Corey, hi and welcome to militant.com. I thank you for your contributions to this discuss. Let me just quickly run through your write-up. He said, so ultimately, evil are those people marked, so perverted eventually, and spiritually are those shall knowingly rather eat children's slaughtered flesh than free real fish and bread from Jesus. And thirdly, you said, the wheel in the wheel, the color of burial shall make the fire enfolding in itself. In Chicago, parked in Twin Towers Marine City, a green Volvo station wagon with a nuclear bomb built into it. Corey, I want to believe that is a quotation from a book. You do well, and please tell us where you're typing from and where or which book you are quoting from, and let us enjoy this stream together. Like I said before, I want to run through a couple of things here, because to do evil is a human thing, and to react to that same evil is also a human thing. Everything is, it's all human. And so the flight or relocation from whatever the Jews were to the land of Israel was called the Aliyah. In history, there were about 4 to 5 Aliyahs in history. So young people leaving Europe and going back to the land of Israel. The fourth Aliyah of 1920 to 1948, where several unarmed Jewish civilians were killed. Now, that is where our first point comes in. The high level of what the Jews, the inhumanity that the Jews had to go through in Europe. They had no other option, than to begin to embrace death as it is. So you see that in Europe, let's get something straight. The European government at that time valued the Jews. Yes, that is the point of history. They were highly valued because the Jews were highly resourceful, very resourceful people, and then they were also highly very commercial. So let's get that straight. So the European government liked the Jewish brains, they liked the Jewish pockets, but they somehow hate the Jewish people. How do you conduct this? And so most of them were not allowed to leave. You see the point? They were not allowed to leave. So Jews, I wrote down here in my diary that Jews were mostly despised, but their possessions and knowledge weren't. Therefore, they were forbidden to emigrate. They were forced to suck in whatever foreign governments threw at them, locked up in ghettos and concentration camps. I read somewhere that this quotation, that at the rivers of Babylon, there we sat, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hung our harps upon the willows, and upon it, he said, there those who took us captive asked of us a song, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? He said, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, if I do not honor thee above my chief joy, let my hand forget our cunning. This was a quotation that was being quoted to generations after generations after generations of Jewish children by their parents. So, you see, it is something that is suffering that fathers got bequeathed to children, children bequeathed to the children after them. So, you find out that it was something basically that continued unabated, unchecked, no hope. So, the Jews were loved for their brain and for their possession, but then hated for their person. I have not been able to connect both of them. I have not been able to connect both of them. Now, a series of murderous anti-Jewish programs swept across Russia at that time, and a huge 2.5 million Jews immigrants began to leave Eastern Europe for the USA in 1880, between 1880 and 1922. You look at the United States of America today, where you have a large number of Jewish communities. People even say, oh, it is the Jews that run American government. We've heard that being said, but you ask yourself, when did this happen? The Jews didn't leave Israel to America. They left Israel for Europe, Eastern Europe, basically, and it was due to a high level of persecution that made them to leave the Americas, to leave Eastern Europe, and then migrated to the America, the free world, where they could get jobs and have and raise families in peace without being persecuted, or envied. So, you see, that was when they started living. But at the same time that Jews were migrating to the Americas, a small number of Jewish young people also went back to Palestine. Then it was under the Ottoman, before the Ottomans were conquered in the First World War, and the Ottoman Empire shared, and Palestine then fell to Britain as a British mandate. So it is instructive to understand this double two-sidedness of the European governments as at that time. Now, at the same time or thereabout, this very I want to pick a word to qualify him. Theodore Herzl. He was a journalist who got tired. Who got tired of everything happening around the Jews, and then began to think what he could do. One man, what he could do to change the stories surrounding the Jews, and he went on and made history. Now, do not forget that every golden moment in every generation is pioneered by passionate souls. you know. So Theodore Hazel is seen as the spiritual father of Israel today. Modern Israel. He's seen as the spiritual father of modern Israel. He was an Austrian journalist. And then when he said, I wrote something here. He said, Theodore Hazel is officially referred to as the spiritual father of the Jewish state, launched the modern Zionism movement in 1896. In his pamphlet, De Judenstaat, the Jewish state, Hazel considers the Jewish question. That's where I was coming to. History is full of what I call man's integral inhumanity towards man. You find out that man is the problem of man. No, not some God, not some evil somewhere. It is man. Now, due to the way the Jews were being treated, they became a problem. Why can't these people go to their country? Now, they don't have a country. Their country has been taken over by the Arabs, and there became a gap. There was a people who had no land, a people without a land. What happened to their land? You see, the question keeps revolving and revolving and revolving, and which today is now known as the Jewish question. So Hazel considers the Jewish question. I want to actually quote what he wrote. He said, everything tends, in fact, to one and the same, which is clearly enunciated in that basic Berlin phrase. Judean rules out with the Jews. You see, there are words that capture moments. Judean rules means out with the Jews. Where will they go to? They don't have a land. They don't have a place. Where do you want them to go to? So he said, I shall now put the question in the briefest possible form. Are we to get out now, and where to? Because answered himself. He said, or maybe we yet remain. For how long? Then Hazel answered that question by proposing a Jewish homeland. The whole plan is in its essence perfectly simple, as it must necessarily be if it is to come within the comprehension of all. Let the sovereignty be granted to us over a portion of the globe large enough to satisfy the rightful requirements of a nation. The rest we shall manage for ourselves. They just needed a space. To post Argentina. He said, we shall take what is given us and what is selected by Jewish public opinion. That is what Hazel proposed. Because there was a need for them to belong somewhere, and the world is big enough to contain and to size all of us. So he knew this, that the world is big enough, the world can take all of us, and so he proposed two places. Is either you guys allow us to go back to Palestine, or you allow us and give us a space that is big enough to contain us, where we can have borders and boundaries and call a home. The rest we will manage. And in 1897, Israel began to put his plans to action by convening the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. The first Zionist conference. It was not enough for him to dream or to make suggestions. It was enough for him to put those plans into actions. If those plans were not put into actions, today several generations of Jewish children would still be going through what their fathers went through. And so when you hear the Jewish phrase never again, it runs deep. It runs deep. It runs very deep. It runs very deep. So he began putting it to action and convened the first the first Jewish Congress in Switzerland, in Basel, and it was a wonderful gathering, a gathering of people who needed change, who needed a home, who basically were tired, So he conveyed that conference in Basel, in Switzerland. He said, at this symbolic congress, which was known as the Basel Congress, the group adopted the Basel program with its stated goals. Zionism seeks to establish a home for the Jewish people in Palestine, secured under public law. A few weeks after that event, Azal will write in his diary, "We had to sum up the Basel Congress in a word, which I shall guard against pronouncing publicly. It would be this. At Basel, I founded a Jewish state. If I said it out loud today, it would be greeted by universal laughter. In 5 years, perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will perceive it." It was a dream for him. He knew what he had done. Why? Because he was able to sow the seed of hunger for a Jewish homeland into the hearts of millions of young people who were basically tired of being treated as second-class citizens in their own land. So, at the Basel Congress, he fired up the young generation in his country. He fired them up, ensured that there was I'm trying to put up a video. That is it. Yes, that was part of now. So he tried as much as possible to sow the seed of his dream into the hearts of millions of young people, and in that Basel conference, and gradually he knew what he had done. He knew what he has done. He understood what was to come. Now, this is the Basel conference. the Basel Conference, hosted first Basel Conference, hosted by Theodore Herzl, to put forth the Zionists. And this is a snap from the Agana group. So he knew what he had sold to them. He was ready to so he was ready. Now things started to move on very fast. After this first Basel conference, the World War I broke out in Europe, and so the Jews fought along their British counterpart, and also some fought in the Ottoman side. So during World War I, the Allies drove out the Turks from Ottoman. At the end of World War I, victory was given to the Jews, the British, who were now in charge of Palestine, and somehow made the Jewish case a little bit simple. He said, let's not forget that at times this same land space during the Turkish rulership was also called Ottoman Syria. He said in 1970, the British government announced its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in these 67 words showing on the screen, which is known as the Balfour Declaration. Now, this was a major decider for the Jewish dream, and it was a major leap towards statehood. So after the Balfour Declaration, things started to look a little bit clearer and cleaner. So I'm just going to read the Balfour Declaration, and it said, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It's being clearly understood that nothing shall be which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. So that was the Balfour Declaration. Now, after the war, like we said, the British controlled the area of Palestine and was given a mandate by the League of Nations to administer the territory under British rule. The land was sometimes then referred to as Mandatory Palestine. So you see that things after Theodore Herzl moved for Zionism, things became a little bit brighter than as it used to be. But the British were not 100% sincere. Now, the first settlers, the first Jewish people who went in the first Aliyah, second Aliyah, third Aliyah, and fourth Aliyah did believe in a two-state solution, or an Arab-Jewish state in Palestine. That is a fact of history. They believed that they would be able to live together. Now, while the British, that is the first Zionist movement, and on the screen also that is Balfour himself, the British High Commissioner to mandatory British Palestine, and these are Jews who actively took part in the First World War. These are Jewish soldiers fighting along the British. They were at the front of the World War One struggle. So they believed. I was trying to explain something. They believed that there can be a cohabitation of the land space called Palestine. So they actually moved for that after the Balfour Declaration and the first, second, third, and fourth earlier. But as the British kept dragging feet, and the Arabs kept protesting, and the entrance or the coming back of the Jews, they suspected that the Jews were coming back for real now, and the fact of history states that the Jews have a right to those lands. It ended up in a Jewish-Arab binational conflict, which killed thousands of Jewish people. And so the Jews understood they were not going to get the land with soft gloves, and so they formed the two arms, the Haganah, which is the left-wing militant group, and the Egon, the right wing. They knew they needed a military arm, and so now don't take this militant group for granted. These two groups, the Egon and the Haganah, and I think with one other, actually drove the British. They caused the British to abandon their mandate in Palestine. So it's in 1948, the British were forced out of Palestine by two Jewish militias, which is the Haganah and the Egon. Now, this is Arthur Balfour in his declaration of 1917. The reason why the British actually declared this, did this declaration and supported the Jews, wasn't because they loved the Jews, but because, like I said before, they loved the British brain, they loved the Jewish brain and the Jewish resources. They wanted the Jews to support in the war. So they, having a Zionist stand, will ensure that the Jews will also fight alongside them. So you see that it was all about interest to the British. Meanwhile, to the Jews, it was reclaiming identity, reclaiming self, reclaiming nation. It was reclaiming everything. Jerusalem means everything or nothing to the Jews. So that was the prelude. Now when they came, the Arabs also feared that the Jews were attempting to say, okay, this is in one of the conflicts that ensued between the Arab and the Jews, that they wanted to seize the Wailing Wall. And so it resulted in a riot that left 133 Jews dead and 116 Arabs dead. Now, let us push forward. The Jewish population in Palestine, after all this, grew rapidly between 1919 and 1923. Now, Zionist movement was no child's play. Now, I think a whole lot of nations who have been agitating for statehood, for agitating against marginalization around the world, should learn a whole lot from the Jewish people. Like one of the prime minister of Israel said, Golda Meir, who basically cemented the relations between Israel and most African nations. She said that African nations are going through what they already went through, and African nations will do well to learn one or two things from how the Israelis got back their land. Now, in between 1919 and 1923, due to the persecution in Russia and Ukraine, like we said before, the influx of the Jews and the Balfour Declaration led the Arabs inhabitants of the land to develop their own political movement known as Palestine nationalism. Now, this nationalism led to the Great Revolt of 1936 to 1939. This insurrection led the British to propose partitioning the land into Jewish and Arab states. The Arabs rejected the proposal. Like I said before, when I just started this stream, the Jews actually believed they could live with the Arabs in peace. They believed they can be one nation. They believed it is workable, but the Arabs had another worldview about the Jews they hated so much, and so it became unworkable, and at a point the British got tired, abandoned everything for the United Nations to take over, and then they fled. So in another instance, there was also a proposal made that in fact the UN, the United Nations body that was set up to actually settle this rift between these two nations, came up with another master plan, and that is a binational identity where both Arabs and Israelis will be seen as one nation. Yet again, the Arabs rejected it face down. They didn't want anything to do with the Jews. Now, in 1939, the British began limiting Jewish immigration into Palestine. Now, this was a very dark moment, in Jewish history. We understand that this was the period of the Second World War. It was just picking up in 1939, and all the pogroms in Europe. We cannot forget the gas chambers, and most of these happened because there was a cap on the Jews from migrating back to Palestine. They could not. Most of them were caught along the way using small boats to cross into Palestine. They were turned back. Not to talk of many who died on the way. It was a very sad one. And when you come to think about the factor of Adolf Hitler and the 6 million Jews that were gassed, you understand that the charge should not only be on the Germans, but yet also on the British, who blockaded their flights to Palestine at that time. It's a limiting Jewish immigration into Palestine. Even after the Holocaust began creating Jewish refugees in Europe, The UK refused to lift the immigration cap. Thousands of Jews died trying to flee to Palestine in small boats, and thousands more were caught and turned away. The American government supported allowing 100,000 new immigrants into the region. This prompted the British government to abandon the Palestine mandate and allowed the United Nations and allowed the issue be resolved by the League of Nations. You see, it is a very, very sad moment, not only for the Jews, but every right-thinking individual in this world, that people as many as 6 million were gassed, killed, tortured, and dehumanized. And yet, there was a nation who did not allow them to escape. Now, we must understand that there are telltales of British cruelty all over the world, in Africa, in Asia, even in Europe. Even in Europe, the British are complicit of so many of this. Let us move on. He said, on May 15, 1947, the United Nations created UNSCOP, the UNSCOP, the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine. Just want to quickly do and bring up that video. The UNSCOP was in charge of the Palestine when after the Second World War. They were saddled with key responsibility on what to do with the Israeli and the Palestinian question. Now, let us not forget that things have changed. It was no longer the British question. It was now the Israeli Palestinian question. It has changed so soon. It changed, and that is it. That is Ben Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, the declaration. So they had there were a couple of countries, neutral countries who were neutral to this war, were selected to arbit between these two countries. There were Australia, Canada, Czechoslovakia, Guatemala, India, Iran, Netherlands, Peru, Sweden, Uruguay, Yugoslavia. They made up the countries of the UNSCOP. They offered two very brilliant proposals as to how to solve this issue. And number one was the first plan supported by the majority of the committee, that the land be divided between the Arab and the Jews, the Jewish state, with Jerusalem under an international trusteeship. Now, the second plan, supported by minority, was proposed that a federal union of both Arabs and Jews, with Jerusalem as its capital. The Zionists accepted the two-state solution, but the Arabs rejected both. On November 19th, 1947, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the partition plan as Resolution 181, Article 11. Soon after this, civil war broke out in mandatory Palestine. So you see that they have been through a whole lot. They've been able to suck in a whole lot. To this is where, as the picture of Theodore Hazel on the screen, the spiritual father of the Jewish state, and that is Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of the young state in 1948 during the declaration of statehood. He said on May 1948, the British mandate over Palestine expired, and the Jewish people Council issued a proclamation establishing the State of Israel. This day is celebrated in Israel as Yom Ha'atzmaut, Day of Independence, because Israel declared independence on a date that corresponds with the Hebrew date 5th Iyar. The date moves every year, so they don't have a stable Independence Day. Like you go to some countries, it's on the 5th, it's on the 6th of so and so month, but in Israel it moves. Last year was another date, this year will be another date, depends on how it goes. So that is why we named this stream Yisrael, a tale of tribulations, survival, and character. From what we have reeled out today, you will find that this nation is not just a pushover. They've been through their own share of adversity, of torment, of learning, of growth, and of gnashing of teeth. According to everything that the Bible, the Christian Bible, said about them. I have read the Christian Bible from back to back, and reading through the pages of history about Israel, I understand what they have had to go through. You can only imagine. And now that brings me to my question, that character never fails. You would expect the character of a man to repeat itself. So, if after all these tribulations from nation to nation, persecution from place to place, the Jewish people never gave up. Come on, United Nations. There has to be a way. I think there has to be rethinking on how to address the Jewish Palestinian conflict. There has to be a way, another way. The Jewish people will be rooted out of Israel. I don't see that happening now. I don't see that happening ever. So, ladies and gentlemen, that has been our stream for today. Please, I want to thank Wesley Corey II for his comments. I appreciate you. Then we'll keep growing. We'll keep going higher. But please encourage us by subscribing to this channel and hit the remind button. And together, let us build a nation, a world that we will be proud of. And to the nation of Israel, I want to say, God bless you. God prosper you. The Bible says, God bless those that blesses Israel. And to Palestine, I want to say, there has to be a rethink.